So let's talk about why you're enslaved, because it's something, it's very strong. It's a strong thing to say to someone when they are unaware of that fact. And unfortunately, it is the case because of this sort of psychological, modern, covert way of bringing fascism to us, right, in the world. They had to think of a very subtle way of doing this because in the past it was very much overt. It was very Orwellian, like boot in your face, we own you, there's nothing you can do about it. Of course, you're going to get a rebellion against that. So instead, what's happened is the Aldous Huxley Brave New World. And if you read that, you'll see absolutely to a T that's what's taking place today. But why we're enslaved is because we're unfortunately conditioned into this world, into this society through education, where we all have to bow down to authority. We become very robotic in the process. And then the system sort of is self-running from that point, right? Because nobody has any of this imagination left. It's all been destroyed by Western education. So if anyone comes along and says, hey, like, why don't we just do this? Or why don't we do that? Why don't we just be free? Firstly, they would say, well, no. And then they would probably say, well, we're already free, But we're not free because we're having to pay to be alive, right? This is why. We're having to pay to be alive. So shelter, energy, food and water, those things which we're trying to decommodify on this channel, we are actually being enslaved for. And who is enslaving us? It's the property developers, it's the landlords, right? It's everyone, right? We've got to all pay our way through this life. And so when people get on the property ladder, their eyeballs turn to dollar signs, right? Because they can see that they're going to start making money off of you. And so on it goes and on it goes. And you get this huge inequality that we're seeing today. So unfortunately, what we're dealing with here is this very subtle, invisible prison, as they say in the Matrix.
You are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage. Born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind.
A prison for your mind. That's what we're dealing with today, unfortunately. And it's so normalized, like I say, that people just have no way of thinking outside of the box. And if you're familiar with the Adam Curtis documentary, Hypernormalization, he talks about this as well, right? In terms of the fall of the Soviet Union and how, everyone believed that this was going to be forever. Everyone knew that the system was failing. But nobody had any imagination to do anything about it. So they just sort of pretended that everything was functional. And over time, that pretense became a self-fulfilling prophecy. And, they were all enslaved, but they couldn't actually see it. It's sort of like, it's fascinating psychology. I recommend just checking out that Adam Curtis documentary if you get the time. So how do we get ourselves out of this mess, ultimately, is the most important thing for us to talk about, really. Because at the moment, it's so indentured. It's this indentured servitude, right? Everyone has to be working for someone that has more money than, by definition, because they're going to give you some money in return, right? So the intention at the core is what? What is the intention of society? What is the intention for us going forwards? Is it to build a more fair, equal and just society? Or is it just to simply continue the status quo? And the person who is paying you is very much going to want that to be the case, because they're doing well now. They've got a few properties under their belt. They're charging people more and more, per month to survive. And then it's justified by the increase in energy, which is all staged, it's all planned. We can talk about, the deep state actions more in other videos. But let's just focus on how we can actually resolve this, because psychologically we can immunize ourselves against this sort of like rat race, survival of the fittest type mindset that a lot of these property developers have, right? By coming together and doing what the government should have been doing all along, which is to decommodify the basic things that we need to physiologically exist on this planet, right? There's no reason for us to remain the only species that charge ourselves to exist, right? Let's try and think out, use our imagination. All of the ways of thinking that were left at the door of Western education, we need to get back in touch with those things. Let's just see it for what it is. It's a tiny little rock in space. Why don't we just start like we would do on a beach together if there was 10, 20 of us? We would all start to find raw materials and we would start to build and construct our own homes for people, not profit. You're not going to start charging people, right? When you go to like a barbecue, right, for a friend, your friend doesn't ask for money, right, for that hot dog or whatever it is you're eating, right? And that's because like the circle of compassion within that family or friend group has sort of like change their behaviour. You know, like of course they're not going to charge you for a drink of water. Of course they're not. But when you go outside of that, now it's how do you make as much money from? So what we need to do is expand our minds, expand our consciousness. But we also need to realise that we are just on a little rock in space, and therefore, if we can come together and crowdsource, see that crowdsourcing is 21st century, true, genuine democracy, right? Because it's transparent, right? It's democratic, it's optional, right? This is a true method of taxation, right? They've used the crowd. They've used socialism as an excuse for them basically them to steal our money and then misuse it in every way. So like obviously like the concept is sound, but it's not being executed effectively, is it? Like we can see that like how many more years will go by, you know, election after election, before people, you know, and all of the Live Aid and all of these charitable things, it's just getting worse though, isn't it? So, you know, ultimately like everything should be charitable by nature. So this idea of having these like little one-off events here and there where we're doing, you know, for the starving kids over there should be no one starving on this planet, right? So if we actually get to the root issue and deal with it as a cure, then we can move forward. Anyway, I don't want these videos to go on for too long, but what we need to do ultimately is to become a new earth type of government, if you like, although that's a dirty word. Let's just see that we are all human beings. We all have, if you look at the Maslow hierarchy of needs, physiological needs that need to be met first and foremost going forward. So let's lay down a foundation of freedom. And we can call it hashtag freedom first, right? Let's reprioritize things. We're singing and dancing. We're doing all of these things that are absolutely, you know, normal and brilliant. You know, we need to be creative. We need to do all of these things, but we're not building them on top of a foundation of freedom. So once we've decommodified shelter, energy, food, and water, and said that those things we should not be charging ourselves or paying to be alive, then we will start to thrive on this planet and not merely survive. Okay, then we will be able to be. Then we will be able to have much more money, more time. We will be absolutely wealthy, not just financially, because we're not going to be paying any more insane rent and bills anymore. This is all going to be freely provided to us, you know, by the community. We will have more freedom, and freedom is the highest form of wealth. And everyone who's been on a holiday, or you know, will realise that in that week or two, you know, you look back and you think, oh, it's brilliant. I need another holiday. And that's because you were free in that time, but of course it's had an expiry date because, you know, you're actually not truly free. You're only free for a certain amount of time until that number on your bank account goes down. So that in a nutshell is why we're free, why we're enslaved. And this is down to the psychological sort of milieu of capitalism, where everyone is like been atomized and individuated, and we're sort of not working together. And all we need to do is work together. This doesn't involve politicians. It doesn't involve petitions, right? They've had their time. They've had their chance. They've clearly shown themselves to be what they are, which is frauds and criminals and psychopaths. So we need to do what everyone knows should be the case, right? Shelter, energy, food and water, basic human rights. Let's get on with that. newearth.land if you want to be a part of that. And you can check out the what, the why, the how, the when, so on and so forth in more detail on the website. So do check that out if you're interested. Thanks very much for watching this video. See you next time.